everyone. Jeff Palermo along with the editor for Tiger Rag Magazine, Todd Horne. This is the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast brought to you by Paw Paws Campers and Cars. Check out their website, pawpawsrvs.com, or give them a call at 1-800-728-CAMP, 1-800-728-2267. In this edition of the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast, we'll talk with our good friend Glenn Guilbeau from Outkick, an international traveler, Glenn Guilbeau. We'll talk with him about what's happening in the Southeastern Conference. We'll also give you a preview of the LSU Mississippi State game on Saturday morning, the SEC opener for both teams. Caroline Fenton from Locked On LSU podcast will join us, so stay tuned. More of the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast after this.
Hey neighbors, we're not that far from where you are. Make that short drive to Paw Paws Campers in Picayune and see our Wildwood, Catalina, Sportsman, and Zinger trailer lines and our Rockwood and Heritage Glen fifth wheel lines. From Houma to Hammond, Biloxi to Jackson, and Mobile and Pensacola, we're not that far from where you are. Come and see us.
You're gonna love the way we deal. Paw Paws Campers City and Picayune. You're gonna love the way we deal.
Back here on the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast, Jeff Palermo along with Tiger Rag editor Todd Horne is the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast brought to you by Paw Paws Campers and Cars, 1-800-728-CAMP, 1-800-728-2267. Joining us now, our good friend Glenn Guilbeau, who covers college athletics in the SEC for Outkick. How you doing today, Glenn? Fresh off a beautiful trip to Paris where you celebrated your wife's 50th birthday. That's pretty cool.
Dude, you shouldn't be saying women's age.
I told him that. I said we probably shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, age is just a number, Glenn. Age is just a number.
Okay, somebody's crawfishing.
Hey, Glenn, my wife told me that 50 is the new 20, so.
I don't know about that. That's a stretch.
All right. Oh, well, okay.
I liked it.
How many more wives you going to insult today, Palermo? Keeping yours safe, though.
Yeah. But how was
great?
How was Paris?
It was great.
Well,
Paris is beautiful. It really is. I mean, and it's hugely populated and a lot of traffic, but no more than Baton Rouge. Believe me.
Well, Glenn, I mean, I know Paris is a lot like New Orleans, but we'll talk more about that later. Since you're from New Orleans, I would imagine you felt right at home in Paris.
Yeah, there is a lot of architectural similarities. You know, the wrought iron and cafes and bars at every corner. Not quite the number of impressive museums and bridges in New Orleans as Paris, though. But no, it was something else, really. We could have stayed another few days, and boy, I tell you, you got to go to Normandy. Every American needs to go to Normandy. That was really impressive. You know, Omaha Beach, Utah Beach.
Right.
Those were all really something else.
Well, that's cool. Did you happen to catch any college football while you were, I guess, storming the beaches of Normandy?
No, I was tracking the Ole Miss Tulane game because Tulane almost won that game, or looked like it. But like the Alabama-Texas game didn't start until 1:30 a.m. Paris time, so I missed that one. And we did watch the Saints game at a rugby sports bar at halftime of the rugby game, or during a break in the rugby match. Excuse me. The guy let us watch some of the Saints, and the clientele was like, "What is this? Pro football, American football on?" You know. Football is just not big, and I mean, our football is not big in Paris. But I was able to watch the end of the Saints game. That was pretty cool.
Cool. Well, while you were in that bar, did you happen to run into Mel Tucker? Was he over there?
Oh, wow, Todd Horne going hard.
Well, he wasn't coaching, so.
No, didn't see Mel. I did talk to Mel a few times when he was, on LSU staff. He was part of Nick's first staff.
Nick, who's
at
Nick?
LSU. Nick Saban, secondary coach in 2000.
How quickly we forget. How quickly
Yeah.
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 And there's a belief. Glenn, there's the belief, too, that Dr. William Tate wanted Mel Tucker to be the next head coach after Ed Orgeron.
Wow, I have not heard that one.
I mean, it was he wasn't. I mean, at the time, I mean, he didn't mention names, but he was looking to see if there could be a coach of color that would replace Ed Orgeron, whether that's Mel Tucker, James Franklin. I mean, those were the two hot names at the time.
Well, considering the sexual assault lawsuits against LSU, I guess he would have fit right in, right?
Wow. So Mel, let me get this.
Didn't keep one of them off staff. They're on staff right now.
Yeah.
So he'd have fit right in.
Yeah. So let me get this straight. Mel Tucker was not in the bar in Paris with you when you were storming the beaches of Normandy, or what?
No, he was not, Todd.
Okay. So what do you know about that story, since you have such a strong relationship with Mel Tucker dating back 20 years?
Before you interrupted me, I was just going to say that Mel Tucker was a very good assistant coach with LSU, and he left after one season to go to Ohio State, I think it was. But I remember Nick being upset. You know, he would get upset when a guy left after 1 year, particularly. And he was really upset because he really thought a lot of Mel as a coach. But that's a disturbing story. There's two sides of it, but it looks like Mel's side is not that believable. We'll see what happens with Michigan State. I see where they're bringing back D'Antoni, who in some role, who was a great coach at Michigan State, another Saban former assistant. But Michigan State's had a rocky road on and off the field and in and out of the arena in the last few years, for sure.
Well, what do you think is actually going to transpire there? Do you buy what Mel Tucker's insinuating, that he's basically funded by two boosters for his $95 million contract, and this is just a way for them to get rid of him?
Well, it is a way for them to get rid of him, but they're looking to get rid of him because of he's not been a good coach, and even if they use that to help get rid of him, he apparently, he could have still done it,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he has much of an argument there. That it looks like they're going to be able to, fire him with cause, and that helps with the payout. We saw that with Will Wade, who was obviously guilty.
Well, do you think that he'll end up in Nick Saban's house of rehab over at Alabama?
Possibly. There's always a chance. I keep looking for Coach O to surface over there, or Les Miles maybe. But
do you know where Les Miles is?
No. From what I understand, he is incognito. I'm not sure where he is. Haven't seen him either. Todd didn't see him in Paris.
He wasn't there either. Okay. But anyway, no, seriously, do you think let's shift to Nick Saban, whether Mel Tucker ends up there or not? I would say it's probably pretty likely he would if he does, get the boot at Michigan State, which it certainly looks like he's headed that way. But what about Nick Saban? I mean, has the game suddenly passed him by?
Well, I think I definitely think. Possibly, it's particularly the part of the game that is the transfer portal, because he definitely missed out on some quarterbacks he probably could have got if they would have entered the portal search in January, mm-hmm. and not been left with a leftover from Notre Dame like they did after spring football. I think that's hurt them. I don't think there's a good quarterback on that campus. I really don't. I think LSU has two better quarterbacks than Alabama has. I think Ole Miss has three better quarterbacks than Alabama has. I think the only SEC West team that does not have a quarterback better than Alabama is probably Auburn, and that's probably close. I think every other SEC West team has a better quarterback than Alabama's. And, when was the last time you said that? You'd have to go back to, like, John Parker Wilson in 2007, Saban's first season.
Well, even though you didn't get an opportunity to actually watch the game live, were you able to catch up on it afterwards? The game against Texas?
Right. I thought Milroe actually did not play poorly. he played okay. The offensive line was not good, and that was the most striking thing about that game was how Texas was better on both lines of scrimmage than Alabama. Mm-hmm. And that's just something, you haven't seen in years, really, out of either school. You haven't seen Texas push people around on the line of scrimmage, and you haven't seen Alabama pushed around by anybody on the line of scrimmage for some time.
And wasn't that a key part of what Alabama and Coach Saban were going to try to do this year, which was rely more on the power, physical offense, offensive line in the running game?
Exactly. So that does not bode well for them. I see. I think there's several other teams that can play with Alabama and possibly beat them. Ole Miss, LSU, maybe even Auburn. Hugh Freeze has had Coach Saban's number when Saban has had much better teams than this one. So doesn't look good.
And I'm being serious here. Let's say worst case scenario, Alabama finishes in the regular season 9-3 or even 8-4. Does he retire?
Well, I think he could retire regardless of what the one-loss record ends up being. I think he did just purchase an $11 million home near Tiger Woods' home in the Jupiter, Florida area. Mm-hmm. Of course, he's purchased homes before and not retired, but he is going to be 72. He did make a strange comment after the game Saturday. He talked about what a privilege it is to coach at Alabama and how great the fans are. And he kind of interjected that as he was walking from the podium, without a question. That it looked almost like a goodbye. It was definitely different, not your normal press conference answer. But everybody could be reading the tea leaves too. It's up in the air, I think, because he could change his mind at any moment, and he's done that before. He didn't want to go to Miami, then he did. He didn't want to go to Miami. He didn't want to come to LSU at first.
Right.
Then he did. Then he almost changed his mind. So he tends to go back and forth on big decisions, and other coaches have done that as they've retired. Spurrier did that. So it's going to be interesting to watch as the season goes on.
So the story about Saban and LSU, really quickly, because I want to get into another subject that's related to Saban somewhat. But when he was at LSU, is it true, Glenn, that he came to LSU sight unseen, and that when he was driving or being driven from Ryan Airport to LSU for the announcement press conference introducing him, that he looked at it and said, "Oh my God, this is worse than Detroit," and seriously considered going back to Michigan State?
Well, he did come to LSU sight unseen. I don't think he had ever been to Baton Rouge. He had been to New Orleans and had recruited Shaw and other schools in the New Orleans area. And I think when you fly into Baton Rouge, it does look pretty bad when you come in from the Port Allen side and going over the river from that way. So that's believable. But I think that didn't have anything to do with he was just pulling back because he thought it would be a mistake, not because of the town or anything, just because he didn't know if he could. He didn't know if it was a good decision going from Michigan State to LSU. Because if you look at it, when he went to LSU, they had lost in 8 of the previous 11 seasons, mm-hmm. and lost bad. Mm-hmm. So I think that was more than the topography.
So do you think he ultimately decided to come or stay, rather, in that situation because Miss Terry had already found a house and she was eager to move down here?
No, I think he just changed his mind. I don't think he ever completely changed his mind from taking it. He just had some, buyer's, what do you call it?
Remorse.
Buyer's remorse. Yeah, I just think he had some of that. Right before a big decision, he had a little of that, just like he did before he went to the Dolphins.
I was Yeah, I was actually chatting with a friend of mine in Los Angeles who works for an ad agency that I'm not going to name right now, last week, or actually Sunday, I should say. And he told me that they actually do Aflac work. They work on the Aflac account. And he, Saban and Deion Sanders are partnered up on that account. They're the personalities for it. And he told me that he really thinks that Deion Sanders might be the replacement at Alabama for Nick Saban when and if he does retire.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that would happen.
Well, he can operate the transfer portal.
He can, and he's a good recruiter, and he's proven. I mean, he's worked his way up. He's won at each level and moved up. But I don't think, still he's inexperienced as a big time coach, though he has been successful so far this season. But no, I think that Alabama would move toward a more established head coach than Deion if Nick does leave after this season. Now, if he hangs on a couple more years and Deion continues like he is, then that would be more of a chance.
Do you think if Nick were to retire at the end of the season, that Sarkisian would get an opportunity? Steve Sarkisian, the Texas coach that just beat him. Yeah,
I think he would get a look. I think Lane Kiffin would probably get a look. Who knows? Dabo Swinney might get a look, though he's declined since he won 2 out of 3 championships there, 2 in 3 years. But yeah, I think those guys would be candidates.
So who's your pick now going into week 3 to win the SEC West?
Boy, which West team has looked the best? Boy, I don't know. Right now, not based on how they've looked, but just what they have and how I think they could be, I would have to say LSU is the favorite in the West.
Did you get a chance to watch any of the $760,000 glorified scrimmage that took place with Grambling State on Saturday night?
No, did not watch any of it.
Okay. All right. I was just curious if you watched that game and that helped you with your prediction.
No,
or not.
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think Florida State is a really good team, and I said that going in. I said Florida State could win that game, and I said LSU would probably go into the Alabama game with only that one loss if they did lose that game, and I still think that'll happen. Though Auburn is a dangerous game, and so is Ole Miss.
It'll be the last time LSU plays Auburn for at least a few years. That's weird.
Yeah, it is. It is. But it's good to mix up the schedule. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to beginning next year with Texas and Oklahoma coming in.
Are you going back to Paris next year?
No.
Oh.
But we'll see. Probably going to stay on the mainland. It's really a hassle going through customs and. I've seen too many movies where you take a wrong turn and you end up in jail, Overseas, you never know what's going to happen.
All right, Glenn.
Glenn, thanks a lot for joining us on the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast. We'll see how this is where it really gets fun with LSU opening up SEC play this Saturday against Mississippi State. Last time they played Mississippi State in a while, too. So, it should be interesting. So one last trip to Starkville for a few years. Thanks for your time today.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then LSU is 3-3 since they beat Alabama. So this is a big game for Brian Kelly.
It certainly is. All right, that is Glenn Guilbeau from Outkick. We'll have more of the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast brought to you by Paw Paws Campers and Cars, pawpawsrvs.com, 1-800-728-CAMP, 1-800-728-2267.
People come from everywhere to Paw Paws Campers and Cars.
All at Paw Paws Campers and shit is Paw Paws Campers and Cars of people.
And we're gonna let it go for I forgot.
Take the whole family over to pick you. We got something for you. All right. What else we gonna say?
pawpawsniceprice.com.
That's probably all we need to say.
So we're back. This is Todd, Horne, editor of Tiger Rag, and I'm with Caroline Fenton of Locked On LSU, podcast that you can catch on basically anywhere that podcasts are available, including YouTube, pretty much every day. How you doing, Caroline?
I'm great. I appreciate y'all for having me. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. What do you think? I mean, we're less than, 24 hours or so away from an 11 a.m. kickoff in Starkville, the opening of SEC play, and I don't think meaning LSU is where we all thought LSU would be at this point necessarily, say maybe a month and a half ago.
Yeah, don't love an 11 a.m. kick ever, but it's a necessary evil, and I think that's something that we've learned over the last couple of seasons. But you're right. Going into this season, I expected LSU to be 2-0, and in order to be 2-0, I expected LSU to beat a very good Florida State team. I would have felt so much more confident about this team had they proven that they could move the ball downfield against Florida State. They did not do that. I would have felt more comfortable about this team had the defense played for 4 full quarters, not just against Florida State, also against Grambling. Took the defense a little bit to get going. We haven't seen that. Now, I do feel a sense of encouragement in, one, the emergence of Logan Diggs last week against Grambling. That makes me feel really excited about what he can do in the run game. 2, seeing Harold Perkins more on the outside. Harold Perkins is at his best when he can just fly around and do whatever the heck he wants to do. We saw this coaching staff let him do that against Grambling. So, I think that sometimes the first couple of weeks of a season can be a really important wake-up call. Now, of course, you would prefer the coaching staff go into week 1 with a sound game plan, with the wherewithal and the ability to adjust on the fly and to go off of the game plan if the game plan isn't working. But as we saw, that didn't happen. Maybe that was a necessary wake-up call that this team needed, because they've got a whole heck of a lot of talent and a really good coaching staff, too good to lose to this Mississippi State team.
I agree, but I have to admit that I am a little unsure of what to expect. I mean, I look at the point spread. It's almost like 9.5 points right now. I look at the returning starters for for Mississippi State. I did look at the returning starters for Alabama too, but at Mississippi State. But, with so much change going from Mike Leach to Zach Arnett, and it's only his 4th game as a head coach if you count the bowl game last year, and he is 3-0, but he's completely changed the offense, gotten completely away from the air raid, and primarily, from what I understand, it's so that they can control the ball more and give the defense a chance to rest. And of course, he's so big with that 3-3-5 defense. And they did cause 4 turnovers against Arizona last week, even though it took them an overtime to put down what I think was not too good of an Arizona team. Are you concerned at all about having to face that type of composition of an offense versus a 3-3-5 defense, or do you feel confident with LSU's offense going against that defense?
I am concerned about the offense for a few reasons. One, LSU has, I'll call it misfortune, the misfortune of being the first SEC team that Mississippi State plays, because we all have such little film on this Mississippi State offense and what they want to do. And Zach Arnett's plan was very clearly run the heck out of the football in the first 2 weeks. And they're 2-0. So I think that was the game plan was, let's just establish our run game, and then once we get into SEC play, now we want to have an established run game, and Jaquavius Marks has been running the heck out of the football. So they've added that into their arsenal. We know that Will Rogers can throw the football. We know, because he's executed the air raid offense over the last few seasons. So that concerns me, is taking on a Mississippi State offense that's much more balanced than Mississippi State offenses that LSU has taken on maybe under Mike Leach. So really, in the past, I've said this is really going to fall on the defensive line to get pressure on the quarterback, and it's going to fall on the secondary to be all over those receivers. And once you take away the passing game from the air raid, what else do you have left? Now, LSU is tasked to both stop the run and get pressure on Will Rogers. Because if you stop the run and you sell out to stop the run, Will Rogers has the arm, the ability, and the receivers to be able to beat you in the passing game. So that does concern me a little bit. But what I will say that does not concern me about LSU's offense taking on this Mississippi State defense is that Mississippi State struggled to contain Jayden DeLauro, the quarterback at Arizona. Not only are their first names the same, but they also have very similar games, Jayden Daniels and Jayden DeLauro. And Jayden DeLauro is an incredibly mobile quarterback. He can extend plays with his legs, like a Jayden Daniels can, but Jayden Daniels can simply do it better. So that does give me encouragement that this Mississippi State defense has proven that one of their weaknesses is limiting what a mobile quarterback can do. Now, with that being said, I don't want this whole offense to run through Jayden Daniels. Right. I don't want Jayden Daniels to be this team's leading rusher yet again. It just simply is not sustainable. But if that's what they have to do in order to get this win in Starkville, then do what you have to do.
Well, it kind of goes back to where you opened when we first started talking. You were talking about your excitement over Logan Diggs, and he certainly did look explosive last week. 15 carries for 115 yards, a touchdown. But it was more obviously the competition wasn't what you would like that
right.
So you don't know how to measure that necessarily. But he does have the experience at Notre Dame, and he is a well-rounded back. So I think that you're right. I think that's something that LSU can certainly, and LSU fans can certainly look forward to, is having Logan Diggs. And, of course, John Emery Jr. comes back, and he's an explosive, game-breaking back. It'd be interesting to see him and what he could possibly do. But, Caroline, I'm most concerned about the LSU defensive line, to be honest with you. I know everybody talks about the defensive backs, and, of course, that's concerning. But I just, Mason Smith is back. Mekhi Wingo was great in parts of the Florida State game. But overall, I'm just not impressed with the defense at all right now.
And that's completely fair because it's really difficult to watch the first quarter and change of that Grambling game and feel incredibly excited about the defense. When you give up the number of yards, the number of points that you give up to Grambling, they score on their first possession, kick a field goal in the second, get into field goal range in the third, and you just kind of get lucky that they missed that field goal. Of course, you're not going to feel good about the defensive line. The one thing that gives me hope, though, is that LSU started that Grambling game with a 4-4-3 defense. A 4-3, not a 4-4. I'm thinking 3-3-5 in my head, with a 4-3 defense.
Right.
So that, and then once Grambling saw that really what they needed to do was run the football and get the ball out quick, that's when the LSU defense made adjustments. And that's when Grambling was completely stuffed, when they didn't score a point the rest of the game. Now, that slow start and those adjustments, the adjustments are necessary, and they made them, and, good. That's what you should do. The slow start, on the other hand, and maybe not coming out with the right approach to be able to stop Grambling off the jump, that concerns me because when you go up against Grambling, you can overcome maybe a 10-point, 7-point, 3-point deficit. Right. When you start slow against Mississippi State and you start to get into a 7, 10-point hole, that becomes a much bigger discrepancy because you're going up against a much more talented team. So it is a concern, but I look at a couple of things, and Brian Kelly even said it. That was a knock-the-rust-off game for Mason Smith. Let's not forget, he hasn't played in a complete game in almost 2 years. There's some reacclimating that you have to do, and I'm not going to act like one game against Grambling all of a sudden gets him back to peak Mason Smith performance. But I think that makes me feel more encouraged of, all right, you got one game under your belt. You good? You feel better? Okay, great, wonderful. And also I think Harold Perkins. And while his impact didn't show up necessarily in the box score, just the fact that he was moved out more to the outside and this coaching staff was allowing him to do more of what he does best, and that's simply whatever the heck he wants to do, that makes me encouraged that could possibly and should be the game plan going into Mississippi State. Because if you put Harold Perkins in one place, like LSU did against Florida State, Will Rogers is a veteran enough quarterback to say, all right, well, I'm just not going to throw it your way. I'll just throw it to the weaker side of that defensive line or that defense. So I think that if Harold Perkins can just be wherever the ball is, that gives me encouragement. But you are completely fair and justified in feeling concerned with the amount of talent that this defense has, and the fact that it really hasn't lived up to the talent that it has on the roster.
Last question for you before I ask you to make your prediction for us, but do you think we'll see Aaron Anderson actually returning punts, or do you think that's gone?
I think that we will. And I think that for any punt returner, kick returner, the leash is short. It should be short. The leash is much shorter in special teams because special teams is simply just do your job. Just do your job. But I think that this coaching staff brought Aaron Anderson in primarily as a special teams contributor. I think secondary is his contributions in the passing game as a receiver. And, of course, you can grow in to a larger role in the passing game, but I don't think that they're going to abandon it that quickly, but you cannot afford special teams mistakes. Couldn't afford it against Florida State. You shot yourself in the foot, and you absolutely cannot afford those mistakes in SEC play.
All right. Well, so are you going to be up at 11 o'clock? Are you going to be drinking mimosas, or what are you going to be doing?
Just putting a little something extra on my coffee. I will be up. I'll be up and at 'em. Just have to set my alarm clock a little bit earlier on Saturday morning. I'm excited for this game. I understand that LSU fans don't feel as confident as they would have liked in this team going into SEC play. And I know that, what happened last year, you have no guarantee of that happening again. But I felt just as uneasy about this team last year as I do now. So I'm hoping that this can be a get-right game and a big prove-it game for LSU. And, hey, yeah, we adjusted things against scrambling, and we're able to do it and execute it against higher-level opponents. Because if you can't get a win against Mississippi State, it doesn't make me feel much better about taking on the Alabamas and the A&Ms of the SEC.
I agree with you, Caroline, and I think what you just said is really the big point. LSU has to start developing their identity and what kind of team they're going to be starting now for the rest of the year. And I forgot to mention, I'm sure you're aware that since beating Alabama, Brian Kelly is now 3-3. And so this is really a big-time crossroads game for him as well.
It's an important game to prove that you can win those important games. After that Florida State game, all of the fair criticisms came out of, look, LSU's gotten blown out a lot under Brian Kelly. Of, look, yeah, you got that great game against Alabama, but you have a lot of stinkers on the resume. I think that this LSU team needs to continue to prove that they are, the hype that they were getting going into this season is justified. This is a football team with so much talent on it. I think sometimes as LSU fans, we tend to maybe get a little greedy, or maybe we tend to take for granted just how much talent this team has on it. But, at Davis Wade Stadium this Saturday, you're going to have the more talented sideline. You have the better coaching staff. Let your players do what they do best.
Wow, I like that. So what's your prediction?
Unfortunately, I do think it's going to be a much closer game maybe than we anticipate, maybe than Vegas anticipates, simply because it's so early in the season. And, I think that adjustments are going to be necessary, and maybe you set yourself behind the 8 ball, but you're able to overcome it. Very similar to what we saw last season against Mississippi State. Rough first half for LSU. Second half, they came out firing on all cylinders. So I'm going to say final score 34-28, fairly high-scoring game, but LSU is able to pull away with a more comfortable lead in the fourth quarter.
Okay, having said that, LSU's leading rusher at the end of the game will be A, Logan Diggs, or B, Jaden Daniels?
No. Oh, that's a good question. I might say, I think Jaden Daniels. I don't like it, but I will predict Jaden Daniels.
All right, Caroline. Well, thank you so much for your time. Be sure and catch Caroline Fenton every morning on Locked On LSU, wherever you get your podcast, and I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Have a good one. Enjoy the game.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
That will do it for this edition of Tiger Rag Audibles podcast. Want to thank our two guests, Glenn Guilbeau from Outkick and Caroline Fenton from Locked On LSU, as she hosts that podcast, that daily LSU podcast. For Todd Horne, I'm Jeff Palermo. Enjoy the game on Saturday, and this has been the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast.